Welcome to the Catastrophic Comeback Podcast with American injury lawyer Clark Speaks, helping you find hope, purpose, and joy after a catastrophic injury.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Catastrophic Comeback. Today, I'm very happy to have Daniel and Sarah with us to tell about their experiences. Good morning, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Good morning. Thank you.
So can you tell me, you guys, Sarah, you were in an accident, is that right?
Yes, both of us were in an accident. I was driving that day.
Okay. Well, so let me ask you this. What was going on in your life before the accident? What was going on? What were you doing? What was your life like? What was your day-to-day? What was your routine?
Well, at the time, I was actually already on disability at the time for some medical issues at the time already. And Dan was working at Target. We were moving. We actually had moved to the beach where I had always wanted to live. I had been working at a company up here that allowed me to work from home down there, which was what I wanted. And Dan was going to go to school for plumbing. We were doing well, financially, we're doing okay now. And we lived in nicest place that we've ever lived. I loved it there. We were at a really nice apartment close to the coast, and we were able to visit frequently. I had, a lot of independence, and I had, I still had my position, and, the pets were all doing well. They're still good today. But it was, it was a really nice environment. I had always wanted to live at the beach with my best friend and my pets, and we had everything that I ever wanted. But I was like getting treatment at the time and was going to go back to work. Since the accident, they have let me go, so I no longer have that.
Well, you said your position. What was your position?
I was doing medical billing and collections. I was on the phones all day, and I took a risk and said, hey, I'm moving, can I stay with us and work from home? And they allowed me to do that. And I was on FMLA and the disability, and they continued the FMLA after I got out of the hospital, but it eventually ran out, so they had to let me go. And I had schedule that I wanted there. I really liked what I was doing. I loved being from home, working from home. I had a great schedule and friends there. And when we moved to North Carolina, Dan actually gave up a position at a really good job. Fortunately, they took him back with open arms when we moved back up, because he's a great worker. But he was at a company up here, and he was doing really well, and they really liked him, and he had given that up for us to move, and we were still plugging along, comfortably. We were really happy. And that I don't remember the accident. Daniel does a little bit, but the car, was totally destroyed.
So can you tell me a little bit about the accident? So it sounds like everything was going great. Your lives were in a good place. You were enjoying being together. You were enjoying your pets. You had good positions. You had plans. You had dreams. And then what happened on the day of the accident? Dan, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was in the afternoon. It was like 2 or 3, I believe. We decided to go to the beach because Sarah loves the beach more than almost anything else. Most of the time I drive, but I know how much she likes driving. I was like, oh, okay, you can drive.
I love to drive.
I know you do. And we had just left our apartment parking lot and got to the first street light. So we're maybe a block away from our actual house. We're stopped at a red light. It's red. Everything's fine. It goes to green. Sarah looks both directions, proceeds to make a left-hand turn, and I hear her make an audible yell, and then I stop and I look, and I see a Jeep coming at us, and then I don't really remember a whole lot. I remember fleeting bits of information from that point on until I wake up in the hospital.
And I don't remember anything about it. We were in our little Nissan Sentra, and it was a big Jeep, driving a big Jeep, and he ran the red light like several seconds after it. Other people were stopped already. I did not see him. He was on the second, like there was a 2-lane road, and he was on the other side of the cars that had stopped. So he wasn't paying any attention. I don't remember it, but he was in the hospital overnight. I was in the hospital for 22 days. I was in a medically induced coma for 3 days. I had a traumatic brain injury, which is still affecting us today, which I can tell you about in a little bit. Clavicle broken, which I have, a scar from, punctured my lung. I have some scars there. I had a punctured lung, and at the time, I was already dealing with the recovery from my eating disorder issues that I had had. So all of this was together. I had a fractured vertebra, and all of my facial bones were smashed in. I had just had a corrective nasal surgery to correct my very deviated septum just about a month before, and then that was destroyed. I had broken jaw pieces, like facial pieces, and my nose was smashed in. I just recently got it fixed again, but there's only so much they can do when you only have so much left that's there, because there's a lot missing. And the traumatic brain injury caused seizures, severe seizures. And the kid, he was going almost 50 miles an hour. So it was pretty bad. And it was basically a T-bone. So I still have the seizures today. We had me on medicine, after I was there for the 22 days, and I continued to have seizures, very traumatic. We've had take videos, just because to send to insurance, so they'll pay us. And I'm screaming, begging for help in the videos because my head hurts so bad. And then I've continued to have seizures since then after adding different medicines. I basically am on the top of all the medicines. They've done an external EEG. They can't find where the seizures are coming from. And now it's about 2.5 years later, I'm going in for brain surgery in September, which may or may not solve the issue. They're going to go and do an internal EEG and try to pinpoint where the seizures are coming from. And they may put a stimulator. I refer to it kind of as like a defibrillator for the brain if I was to go into a seizure. Or they would cut or burn a little chunk out if they can find that. But it's a risky thing, of course, and that's coming up. They're going to have to, shave little chunks of my hair. And it's a lot. And so it's still, 2.5 years later, we're still dealing with all of this. And I'm scared about that. And we both still have pains, traumas. I see multiple therapists. And we had to move back up here. It's been,
where's up here?
PA, Pittsburgh, PA. I always wanted to get out of here. Can't stand it. Can't stand the weather here. Can't stand the busyness. Loved it down there. I loved it. Like I said, since I've lost my job, he got his back, fortunately, and we had to move back for care for me. Basically, I have to have somebody around all the time in case I have a seizure, because they come out, very randomly. And so we moved back up here, and because we just couldn't, there wasn't help down there. And that was heartbreaking. And we moved up here, and we moved to a place that we've since moved away from. It was very too expensive. And a friend of ours from North Carolina needed a place to stay. She was getting kicked out of her apartment. So we were friends. We thought, hey, let's do something where you come up, we'll help you out. You stay with us for a little while, and all you have to do, is keep an eye, make sure that I don't have a seizure. We moved to a second house to save money so we can eventually buy a house, because we're saving about $600 a month on rent right now.
Right.
And the house, that was an extremely traumatic situation, because it's a friend of ours' parents' house that they're renting out. And somebody had lived in it for like 40 years. They bought it and said, they had renovated and cleaned it up. But basically, I think they had set themselves up for more than they could handle, because of the house was filthy. I bawled and cried when we got here, and we spent about a month buying carpet cleaners, sweepers, cleaning, scrubbing, all of this, right, while we're both dealing with health situations. And our friend moved up that was going to stay with us. She didn't like her room and left, and then we had to scramble to find care. And since then, it's kind of been a balance of like our one friend, Mare, who's one of our very best friends, and she has to drive across the city. We live in Apollo now. And then you got, my mom here and there is able to help. In the meantime, she lost her job and had to find another one. And then you've got, my sister having to deal with all of this. And just all these people, trying to balance all of this along with all these other health situations. He had a shoulder surgery. I had a facial surgery. And then the brain surgery is coming up. So it's just a lot of different things.
So Dan, can you tell us about your injuries?
So I had a brain bleed. That's why they kept me overnight. I more or less had more like cuts, scrapes, bruises. I had a concussion for like 10 or 15 days. The real thing that lingered on was it tore something in my shoulder, like the labrum is what I ended up figuring it out after I had my surgery. And nothing quite was done with that until over a year later. So I had to go back to work, and made it significantly worse as as I'm using it. And then I had the surgery in October, thankfully, and now my arm's in a better position, but it took a little bit longer than I really wanted it to be. But other than that, I think out of the two of us, walked out of it pretty okay. I didn't suffer so much.
Well, so what strikes me is that if Sarah, you were driving and you turned left, then the car would have hit on Dan's side. Is that right?
No, he blew past the stoplight and hit the driver's side while we were turning left. That's how
like a head on.
just about. We were really far into the light. This is where my lack of remembering it happened. But he almost hit the driver's side door. He hit where the quarter panel and the door frame start to meet.
Wow. That's terrible. So is there any chance that you guys, if you can get these health things under control, and you can get the seizures stabilized or eliminated through this surgery, is there an opportunity that you may be able to come back to this area?
The way I kind of look at it, I've been saying, is like, I get it. I'm not meant to go after this dream. I get it. It's kind of always came back to slap me in the face. So
well, that's what she says. I keep saying I'm gonna bring her back one of these days. Maybe not soon.
No,
she gonna be back.
I'm just gonna accept that we're here, and we're trying to continue to move forward with just getting my health under control. I'd love to drive again. Miss that. I would love to be able to stay by myself sometimes and go back to work. And another thing, I just related to the fact that you are in, legal situations, they didn't have proper coverage on their kid who was driving to begin with. And so they, none of that was able to help us at all. We had to fight all that on our end. And, obviously with your help. But yeah, there's not a whole, I can't go to the grocery store by myself. I've definitely been struggling severely with depression. It's been a lot of things were destroyed.
Well, so this is some of the things. These are some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. It's so the purpose of this whole this podcast is, every day somebody wakes up after something terrible, and in the first, initially there are healthcare professionals and doctors and nurses, and they're in and out, in and out, in and out. And at some point, a person is alone with their thoughts, and they have to recognize that this has happened to me, and I have to deal with it. In your case, you have these dreams, you have these aspirations, you have this great life that you have built for yourselves. And then in the blink of an eye, something not your fault at all, somebody just not paying attention, it changes. Um, and so the purpose of this is to go into those hospital rooms with people who are in that situation and try to give them some kind of, first of all, we want to give them a realistic picture of what they can expect, which is, I think, what you've done so far, which is, it's hard. And there's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to put a bow on it. It's these are real problems that are difficult to overcome, and they may last a long time. So let me ask you this. You mentioned depression. How does somebody in that situation? Okay, let me ask, if you could go to somebody who is in that hospital room right now after something tragic like this has happened, their life has changed, their dream is interrupted, and they have these serious injuries, and what do you say to somebody like that?
I mean, I would probably say that you have to lean on the people that will be there no matter what. Now, when you are in this situation, you find out that a lot of people say that they're willing to help. They may not actually come through, but there are the ones that will, and those are the ones that you have to, I wouldn't say rely on, but the ones that you definitely need in your corner at all times, and you'll never forget when they were there for all those times. And then obviously it helps a lot when you have a Sarah, like my Sarah, probably, even though I didn't have as bad of a time with the car accident as she did, it still was not pleasant for myself. I probably would have had 1,000% worse time if it was just me and I didn't have Sarah, if I was just by myself. Relying on the support from your supporting cast is what's most important. I know that Sarah probably feels the same way. Like, without each other, like, this whole scenario would be significantly worse, even though it is still pretty bad to this day. But I think together we managed it exceedingly well with all of the randomness to everything that's happened since then.
I would agree. We like Dan's saying, the people closest to you, and that'll really prove, who truly does, care about you, and as well as, like, if you're, married or in a relationship, you have to deal with, some not getting along sometimes, trying to deal with things that don't make any sense. You're in pain, all of that, and you're, either destroyed, like, physically, or you're dealing with your spouse being that way, or God forbid we could have lost one another. But like Dan's saying, the family, the family support, and the pets, the pet support. I've been having, a pretty rough time with depression. For somebody, if I was to walk into the room and, they're in a similar situation, I mean, I would definitely try to, like, give kind of the black and white of what's going on very, very softly. But then kind of try to talk about, okay, what can we do to move forward? Like, we're both destroyed in a lot of ways, but, the moment I got home from the hospital, I was getting stuff like, don't stop. And you have to get this stuff done as soon as you get it, because like, when it comes to bills, legal stuff, any of that stuff, don't set it aside. Get yourself in a kind of an order of what needs done, have, like, a good calendar, have your support, because you cannot let anything get out of control in regards to your life once you get back home. I know it's hard, but if you put through that hard work to make sure everything's stable, you'll be better off in the end.
Yeah, I think another way to say it would be, not dwelling on it or not saying, oh, how could this happen to me? But it's accepting that it has happened. Like, yeah, it's happened. What do we do about it now? Like, we can't just sit there and just allow it to compound and get like exponentially worse by doing nothing. You have to take control of the situation any way you possibly can and put yourself in the driver's seat of all of it and try to navigate through it. And the other people that are there with you are there to help you navigate through the situation. I think accepting the situation for what it is helped me a lot. I mean, just 24 hours after the horrendous accident, Sarah's in the hospital in a coma and stuff like that. I had to do research immediately when I got home. Even while I was concussed, I was calling people back home from Pittsburgh, like, what should I do? And they're giving me all the advice I need. That's how I got in contact with Speaks as well. I also had to go see the car because I had left things like my wallet, my ID, my shoes. I don't know why my shoes were off. My glasses, I couldn't see it all. But instead of not wanting to see the car itself and letting that bother me, as I'm sure it could do for some people, I just had to accept that that's what it was. This is where it was. And I'm sifting through the car. There's a glass, blood. I had to get those things. I couldn't let it defeat me in that situation. I had to get those things. They're very important because it allows me to do more things later on. So I had to, that's what I personally think is very important. It's just accepting the bad and pushing through it no matter what.
And I think one other thing that I just wanted to say real quick, I think one other thing too is like, you got to be careful about what you're putting your values in. Like it's hard when you're on either side of it. Like I would rather be in my position than his, and just because of you have to try to handle, have a handle on your emotions. I definitely recommend seeing therapy and stuff like that too, because that
Most
will
definitely.
help you. Yes, that will help you get everything together, and move forward and try to help you with guidance as to what else you can do, what help there is, like medicines, natural health care, all that stuff. So
Well, that brings me to another question, and that is, sometimes adversity and sometimes stress can negatively impact the relationship that you have with the people that you care about the most. And what I mean is, I'm married 21 years. My wife is fantastic. We have a great relationship. But like if, we have kids, and like if, this morning, for example, we had a kid that was at a camp or whatever and wasn't answering her phone, and it was frustrating. And, she was frustrated about that. And we kind of like were short with each other and all this. And then, extraneous things sometimes negatively impact that emotion, that relationship. One thing that I've always been impressed with about, particularly, from the very beginning, when Dan first contacted us, that your relationship was always a very important component of this process. It was always a important, focal point. It was always a priority. It was always a source of strength. And I don't remember it ever being, and that's something that you guys have. So how do you protect your relationship with the people that you care about? How do you prioritize your relationship with the person you love, even in the midst of really challenging circumstances?
I would say that that's probably been the easiest thing. I mean, Sarah's my soulmate. There is no difficulty. I mean, yeah, the situation, the stress, the depression, we get on each other's nerves. We have our bad days, just like any married couple will. But it never changes anything. It's always such a truly just a blessing to wake up another day and deal with the garbage situation that we're in, but we're in it together. That's probably the thing that for me pushed me through all of it and continues to push me through it. Is there's no one I'd rather deal with all this nonsense with than my Sarah. And That's how I've always looked at it from day one. And I know she would do the same with me if the roles were reversed. If I was the one who was in the hospital forever, like 22 days, and dealing with all the seizures and all the extra stuff since then, I knew she would do the same thing for me. And I'm doing it for her now. So there is no toughness for me at all. It's the easiest part of it, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree when it comes to that. I always say, you know, when you get married, that you have to decide, you know, they say for rich, for better, poor, worse, whatever. You're signing a legal document. So, you know, you better be sure that you're ready to get through it the rest of your life. And you got to understand that there's going to be rough times. Like Dan said, you know, we get irritated with each other here and there. Like you were kind of saying, like with your wife, just, you know, like short with each other that day. But yeah, that's been the easiest part because, you know, we set ourselves up well. We know each other. There's been times where I have to pick up the pace in certain regard, not since the accident really, but in our lives where I've had to kind of pick up the pace a little bit more because of what he's dealing with and vice versa. And it's a wave, you know, it's going to go back and forth, but you've made that commitment and you got to know, you know, you have to, it helps when you have full trust in the other person, no question, you know, whatsoever. You can't have that. And then with the rest of, you know, the people that you love and care about, you have to recognize, you know, it's going to be tough for them as well for the situation. And you know, you want them to be involved and you have to prioritize, you know, what you need from them and let them know, and also be able to kind of understand what they're dealing with as well, seeing you in such a horrible situation. And then too, just as a thought, when you're dealing with these things too, it's also important to remember, you know, I am on a bunch of medications and it takes a little bit of time to find the right balance sometimes, like makes you more tired or irritable sometimes. So you have to keep that in your mind as well when someone who you're very close with is having those issues.
Well, it sounds like that part of it is knowing when, you know, and being cognizant of the fact that sometimes you're the person caring for the other person, and then sometimes you're the person receiving care, you know, and sometimes, and you gotta, it's give and take. Can you tell me a little bit about, you know, how you guys met and the history of your relationship?
You want me to tell?
Go for it.
All
You're,
right.
you're a big talker. You got it.
I've been trying to be good. So we were both working at Target. He was working in the back rooms, and I was working at the fitting room. And I noticed he gradually was bringing over more clothes that I knew where they went. And so I said, you know, hey, I'm trying to get my number, and we shared numbers, you know, and then we went, you know, we went out and we dated for like 2 years. We met when I think I was 19 and you were 21. Mm-hmm. And we lived like one place with a friend of ours for about 2 years before we got married. You know, I was already sure, but Dan was like, you know, they always say to live with the person for a year or two, you know, to make sure. And I was like, okay, then that's what we got to do then. So we did that, and then we got married. We got married in Pittsburgh at a bowling alley. It's a bowling alley along the beach of the of the river. So that's where we were. And we have lived a couple of places since then. We've collected several animals from under dumpsters and other places, and both had, you know, some various jobs and dealing with my health issues over time. We've traveled some places. What do you think?
Basically summed up pretty well. I would say that our wedding was also beach themed. It was
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I made all of our what's it called? I made all the bouquets and everything else out of seashells. So that'll tell you something. But we've had good friends since then. Some you know, some family issues here and there. But we both, okay, well, this is a good example. We both love music, specifically grunge music from the 90s, our favorite. We also love old Western music. We both love like horror movies and animals, and going out here and there. But it's important to, I think, to recognize with someone that you're meeting to have a relationship with, you definitely have to know, like, okay, are you more of the type of person that wants to go out, or the type of person that wants to be in, or are you like are you a balance? Because that can definitely, like, for example, something I've learned from like living with different people right now, there's some people that like to go out all the time. And that's just not something that he or I would ever want. And then, but we both kind of like to be around the house, go out, here and there. And that's something important that you want to kind of have an idea of with your partner, that you both like kind of the similar household situation, whether you have animals or not, what types of foods you eat, all that type of stuff. And then just your lifestyles. That's very important. And before you get married or anything like that, where you're signing legal documents, you have to make sure that, no matter what, you're 100% trusting one another. The trust is such a big thing, because we've lived with, some different people. There are different friends of ours who are men, who come over and sleep with me, not with me, sleep at the house with me while Dan's at work overnight. And there's of course, there's just no, some relationships there would maybe be that like discomfort. You have to make sure that there's none of that, 100% when you're with somebody, especially if you're signing legal documents.
I didn't know this turned into the relationship hour with Sarah.
Sorry.
Well, I think, look, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back.